Hello and welcome to a new episode of The Bike Show and to a new location. Yes, it is a racing circuit and that automatically means it's going to be a good day. It's a particularly good day when, to celebrate your arrival back in South Africa, your work colleague decides to take it upon himself and organise you a perfect little plaything for the racing circuit. What more could you want on a track day than a bike that does it all, and does it all very well indeed? This is Triumph's Street Triple 765 RS, and I think it can lay claim to sporting greatness.
Of course, if we're going to talk about naked little playthings, we have to include KTM. This is the Duke 890, the R version. So what we actually have here is two of the sporty versions of two of the greatest middleweight naked motorcycles. And undoubtedly, this is going to be a lot of fun. However, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the racetrack behind me and lap times and all that kind of thing, let's have a look at what we did yesterday.
Yesterday, which as of now obviously wasn't yesterday, more like yestermonth, Don and I decided to head out to find a long, straight and traffic-free stretch of road where we could get some acceleration figures for the two bikes. In the interests of fairness, we decided that the man to do the job would be an ex-British drag racing champion that we know. He may be old-ish, but there's no denying that one of the very few things that he knows is how to launch a bike. Bill likes to think he can nail it in just the one launch, but age and an increasing level of OCD means he invariably takes a few goes before he's happy with the result.
So you've had one go.
And not forgetting, people that are watching, we are 1,500 metres of altitude in Johannesburg, which is higher than any point in the British Isles. How's that? What that means, it loses 18% of its power with a normal aspirated engine. So if that makes 115 horse, you're losing around 50 to 20 horsepower. So before you moan that you went faster at sea level, yes, we know.
I was perilously close to becoming an excuse before the fact, but we'll let him off. Yeah. We are very high here. Bill is nearly always very high. Perfect match, mate. Go and get a fast time.
A little bit slower because that was horrendous gear changing rod limiter. Age, weight, heat, lack of food.
So you're telling me you didn't get a time?
Yeah, I did.
Just not a better one?
Yeah, it's a little bit slower. So one more. But I did have the limiter in second, so I'd like to give it one more go, please.
You and your one more goes.
Let me just do that
and
again. I'm just resetting for that one thing. I just want to give it a bit of a downhill.
It's always like this. Let's be honest, it's a third or fourth go on this spec. I know what it's like, but it gets to be
I'm not doing quarter mile.
What are you doing now?
Roll on in sixth again.
Okay, roll on, we'll let him off.
I'm a perfectionist, what can I say?
We used some pro timing equipment that we mounted to each bike in a not very pro way and got some numbers for the standing start quarter mile and some roll-ons. This took much longer than anticipated on a remarkably hot, very windy day on the Highveld. We didn't have our camera lady with us because booking issues. I forgot to book her, so you'll just have to put up with my, let's just call it a vlogging style of filming. It also took longer than expected because one of our team, who shall remain nameless, wasn't around when he was expected.
We can think about the KTM if it ever pitches up.
And didn't you want to roll on while I'm at it?
Donovan. Yeah. Each after its own in its place, sort of thing.
Let's see what the old KTM does.
If it ever pitches up.
Yeah, no worries.
In reality, his absence just about gave us the time we needed to get some numbers for the Triumph that I'd brought along.
Don't disturb him when he's concentrating.
Not very clever, but I can weld in the dark.
And then Don pitched up with the KTM 890 Duke R, and since it was his first time on the bike, I was interested in his initial riding impressions.
Hello.
Where have you been?
Sorry I'm late.
Yeah, but where have you been?
I've been having fun.
Oh, okay.
It feels like a KTM. Not a lot of people that's really good, a lot of people that's really bad. I happen to kind of like it. It's like quite tall, almost got like a super motard kind of hooliganism about it, and I'm a fan. I'm a fan. Haven't ridden the Triumph yet, but I like this.
Once we'd got Don off the bike and Bill had prepared himself for the demanding task of letting the clutch out on the orange bike, it was time for some more noise and even more numbers. Although the Duke enjoyed ripping down our unofficial drag strip, it wasn't quite so keen on the first roll-on test.
The 40 to 120, that does whatever. This won't. You put it in 40 and 6 and it goes, it won't pull from 40 and top. Quite interesting, not as easy as I thought it'd be. You got to keep your eye right on the rev grid because it hits the rev limiter so quick. Not as stable as the Triumph and definitely not as quick as the Triumph.
Once we had our numbers, we were faced with one of two rather uncomfortable truths. Either the KTM wasn't quite as quick as we had thought it would be, or Bill was now old enough to be put out to pasture.
Of course, all our figures are made up and they are not actual figures. Otherwise, we might end up bent over in a cell, if you know what I mean.
Yes, it's all conjecture, obviously.
Yeah,
we'll give you our educated guesses.
However, upon reflection, and because we'd been there and seen and heard the test with our own eyes and ears, we decided to go with the Ancient One's wisdom and accept that despite feeling a little bit quicker, the KTM was in fact a tiny, weeny little bit slower than the Triumph. It's no surprise that the two bikes are quite so closely matched in terms of performance, because a quick look at their respective spec sheets soon shows that both are virtually identical in just about every respect. The Triumph makes 121 horsepower, while the KTM musters up 119, though it's the orange bike that significantly out-torques its opponent with 99 Newton meters to 79. This is what you'd expect given the Austrian bike has got 2 cylinders and a capacity of 890cc, as opposed to the Brit bike's extra cylinder and 765cc's. And just to make sure that those performance numbers really do remain as close as possible, both bikes are claiming a dry weight of just 166 kilograms. In terms of chassis, there are some differences, of course, but it's not like they're chalk and cheese. The KTM sticks with the company's signature chrome moly tubular steel frame and bolts to that a set of its proprietary WP Apex suspension with 43mm forks. The Triumph uses a twin spar aluminium beam frame with Showa front forks at 41mm, a bit narrower than the KTM's, while at the rear is an Erlin shock, and on both bikes suspension there is, as you'd expect, a full range of adjustability. Both manufacturers have headed to Italy to source their brakes, with Brembo unsurprisingly being the supplier of choice, with the M50 radial calipers for the Triumph with 310mm discs, while the KTM gets the higher spec Stylemma calipers and 320mm discs. There's a two-way quick shifter for both bikes. Both are excellent, though I think the excellence-ometer nudges towards the Triumph by just the smallest amount. In terms of riding modes and electronic rider aids, it's much of a muchness, though the KTM gets the nod here because it allows you to disengage the ABS on the rear end for ultimate track fun. And that's something the Triumph won't let you do. Neither can turn off the ABS completely because EU regulations say we are all morons, and even when we're at a circuit riding in controlled or even racing conditions, we are not to be trusted with something that millions of us grew up with. and survived even when we were road riding or racing. In theory, the Brits should get a special Boris version now that Brexit has gone through, and they'll be able to turn it off completely. Yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath for that bit of taking back control. Otherwise, it's TFT screens for both, and recent experience suggests Triumph will ace this comparison. Their displays have been superb for years now. Except the small numbers and crowded display and a selection of equally childish, horrible options for showing the revs made me really dislike the Street Triple's effort. The KTMs may be a bit on the small side, but at least I can see the revs clearly and work out what I'm doing more easily. The one major negative with the KTM is the necessity to pay extra to get all the electronic options working, including the quick shifter and the ability to wheelie, whereas the Triumph just gives you the lot from the get-go. In terms of build quality and the levels of finish on components from switch gear to fairings, I'd say the evidence leans in favour of the Street Triple. Welcome back. Time now to return to our middleweight naked sport bike battle featuring the KTM 890 Duke R and Triumph Street Triple 765 RS. The straight line numbers prove that they are incredibly closely matched. Now it's time for some corners, and the only way to find a decent selection of those on the road is to travel a good 300 kilometres out of Joburg, and given the lack of any fairings, we bravely decided a circuit would be the best option. So, Mid-Val Raceway it is, with its occasionally terrible pothole surface, giving us that real-world road riding feeling. To keep the comparison as simple as possible, Don did the laps and put in a time on each bike. Here's his thoughts on those bikes, starting with the KTM.
Do you know what I think of when I ride this bike? A motard. It's sort of taller, the bars are nice and high up, the seat's kind of like high, and it just tips in the corners for nothing. It gives you this feeling of being a hooligan. Over the bumps, all okay. Open the throttle and it purrs. That's the sound it makes, it purrs. Listen to me purr. This is a lot of giggle factor. I feel like some sort of Steve McQueen or something. Actually, that's not right. Travis Pastrana. I don't look like him, I know it. And I have like 1 millionth the skill set, but that's what it feels like on this thing. I'm a hooligan. Haha! This bike immediately feels smaller. Well, shorter. Like my legs are more cramped. I can definitely feel I'm lower to the ground. And it's a little bit broader. Like the seat's broad, the handlebars are broader. I suppose it is a triple, so it makes sense the bike's a bit wider. This is sort of the opposite of the KTM. The KTM tips in the corners for nothing, but once you get up to a certain lean angle, it kind of starts going, all right, this is enough now. Whereas this bike, you kind of have to wrestle it into the corner. But once you're there, it just keeps going. How far would you like to lean? No problem, sir. Would you like your elbow on the ground? No problem, sir. Your face? No problem, sir. And then it sings. Listen to it sing. Ha ha. Like all of these corners here on the KTM, I was taking in third gear and the bike was just purring out of the corners. This one I have to take in second. To be honest, the throttle's slightly snappy. It's in track mode. It takes a little moment to get going. The best comparison I can make is that this is a sports bike. It's a proper track sports bike. Where the KTM is more like a hooligan tool. I've got quite a good feeling that this bike is going to do the better lap time. I could be wrong, but the KTM's more giggle. This is kind of like more serious sort of track bike. Oh, they're both so easy to ride. Oh. So I love about midweight bikes. There's no problem. You ride them, they don't ride you. That's what makes it so fun.
Well, Don was obviously having a very good time indeed, so let's not beat around the bush, mate. The stopwatch was on you.
Yes.
Was it anything like the acceleration numbers, which, to be fair, were just so ridiculously close as to be almost meaningless, really?
Yeah, it is. And when I first rode the two bike before we did the lap times, I really thought the Triumph would be the fastest. But around on this occasion, the KTM came out in a 1 minute 17 dead. The Triumph was a 1 minute 17.2.
Okay,
Now,
well that's
yeah.
look, that's very, very close indeed. But the thing is, I mean, we've been chatting off screen immediately after the laps. You were telling me you felt like there was more in the Triumph, given different circumstances.
By circumstances. Okay, the mid-vault track's really bumpy, and when Triumph was setting the suspension up, I don't think they quite had me in mind. So with a bumpy track and suspension too soft for me, it was quite bouncy.
Okay,
so
you were bottoming out in places, weren't
yeah, okay, yeah, maybe a bit, and I'm prepared to accept part of the responsibility for that. But yeah, if it were a smoother track, then I think the Triumph would have been quicker. But I'm surprised.
Based on what? I mean, obviously the engine is very close, or just based on the fact that there's...
And I'll tell you why. It's because the Triumph feels more like a purpose-built race bike kind of thing. It's a proper sort of sports bike, whereas the KTM is more like a hooligan machine. You know what I mean? So when you got on the two, and you kind of immediately thought, right, this is a track machine on the Triumph, and the KTM is more like sort of half motard fun. That kind of thing.
So I mean, if you're at Kyle Army, it's a lovely smooth circuit, challenging place to go. You've got the two bikes, and someone says, "Don, you've got to set the fastest time on one of these," and then you'd probably you may enjoy yourself more on the KTM, yes, but you'd take the Triumph to do the ultimate lap time.
Although I actually thought the Triumph would be quite a bit faster. I'm surprised the KTM is as close as it is. But I do think a smoother track where the suspension won't bother, I think the Triumph would be a little bit quicker.
Okay. In terms of road riding, they're both absolutely fantastic. In fact, over the couple of days we had the bikes, I was sort of thinking to myself that the Triumph is a little bit more serious. It's a little bit better put together. It's like a friend who takes you out and you go to a really posh nightclub and you have a fantastic evening meal out. Great evening out. Good friend. But the KTM as a mate is a bit more, let's go partying, dude. Yeah,
go down to the pub.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go to the pub, eat too much, drink too much, and possibly end up in a jail cell for the evening until you get bailed out. That's the sort of mate that KTM is.
So the KTM is fun. And you kind of feel bad because you kind of want to like the Triumph more, especially when you look at the two. I mean, the KTM is sort of just built, whereas the Triumph is almost sort of crafted.
Sculptural.
Everything is so beautiful on that bike.
It is.
And you want to like the Triumph, but then you ride the two of them and the KTM just, yeah, as you say, it's like your old mate versus some sort of more serious posh friend.
Yeah. It is that close though. Don't get us wrong. Me in particular, the RS, the Street Triple, has been an epic bike in my life for many years. It really is a superb class act. I think if it came down to me actually spending my own money, I might go the Triumph because the build quality is that much better. Having said that, I don't know if I could give up the fun of the KTM. It's an exceptional bike. Which would you choose, Don?
Okay, if price wasn't an objective, I would choose the KTM. But if another bloke said I want the Triumph, I'd go, yeah, good choice.
Okay, well, you mentioned the elephant in the room. We haven't talked about it yet. Price. Off the top of your head, can you remember how much the KTM goes for?
The KTM is a good price for that market compared to everything else. It's 220,000 Rand. Okay. You consider the M209 SP, which is a similar sort of bike, is about, I think it was 226.
Yes.
And you compare it to all the bigger bikes and that, it's about right.
Yeah.
Which then brings us on to the Triumph.
Which exists in its own alternate reality in South Africa.
I don't know quite how they did this. The Triumph is 180,000 Rand. I don't know. Did they actually buy them from the factory? Did they find that a container ship full of the,
I mean, it's not. They give it with like both wheels and an engine and everything. It's not like they've left anything out.
It's sort of weird because in Europe they're similarly priced. Here in South Africa, the Triumph is 40,000 Rand less.
Yes.
Again, I don't know how they did that.
Let's just sum it up. Money no object. We'd be taking the KTM every time. If you're a real person with a real bank balance and a real wallet, you're an idiot if you take anything but the Triumph.
It's remarkable.
Remarkable indeed. That is about as big a bargain as I've ever seen on a new bike. Thanks to Bill for his help with this test. You can check out what bikes and products he's been reviewing on billiesbikes.co.za, or you can do the same with Don at thebikeshow.co.za. That will do it for this week's episode. I hope you'll join us again next week. We'll see you then.